Hi. I too have a whole load of slightly unintelligible scribbles that, because everything I was going to say I've now changed, and I'm going to try and say something slightly different. So I'm from the BFI. I'm here on quite a practical mission. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we have done in the past, what we're doing in the present, and a little bit, to a certain extent, about what we're trying to do in the future. But I thought I'd start off with this film here, and if I do it properly, I believe I do that. Fundamentalism versus evolution. I'll leave you to draw your own conclusions. But Rick said something about the only solution being evolution. This is from 1924, and it's a staged train crash that the Topical Budget newsreel company put on between the forces of fundamentalism and evolution. And it was made at the time of the Scopes monkey trial in the South. It was about whether or not we should be able to teach Darwin in schools. So when we're talking about interventions in the present, in order to understand and reinterpret the past, obviously films like this have a real part to play. Rick also said that archives should be applauded for their guardianship as well as criticised, and I think that's an extremely important point. I hope that you can applaud the BFI, but I also really think it's very important to criticise it as well. I think it's very important to criticise all archives. The way that we collect material, the way that we interpret it, these are constantly changing things. There's no static argument that we arrive at, that we know that we understand how to collect now. And I was reminded of another. My colleague Iain might be able to remember this better than me. I was reminded of another event we held at the South Bank recently, which was part of our Flipside strand. It's British B-movies. And just before the showing, I forget the actual name of the film, Nigel Algar, our fiction curator, stood up and read a letter from the BFI written to the producer of this film, who had offered the film to the archive. We wrote back and thanked him in a very patronising manner, very much for offering us this film, but it really wasn't the kind of thing that we collected. Of course, there we are 50 years later, showing it at a ticketed event as part of our attempt to tell a new history about the British B-movie. The second film I wanted to show you was The Xrays, 1897. And again, I'm going to make a virtue of the fact that this is a really bad quality, because I only decided to show these films about an hour ago, and so I downloaded them off our back end of our website, which of course I can do because I work for the BFI. But a lot of you can't, which is a point I think we'll get to discuss a little bit later. Anyway, The Xrays, you can see this is a bit of a trick film from 1897, well, I'll leave you to decide what the filmmaker's trying to say or trying to do. But what's interesting to me about this film is there's an entire chapter in an Oxford University Press book dedicated to this title, in which the author speaks very confidently about an 1897 film which shows X-rays in use for the first time. Of course, he'd never seen this film, so he didn't realise that this is actually what it did show. And I think that's, again, an interesting point to think about in terms of access and why we make films available. Finally, I'm going to show you about 3 minutes. Please excuse the sound. Again, downloaded recently. This is a film called Snow, made by Geoffrey Jones in the 1960s. It was made with money from the British Rail, or the British whatever it was at that point. So it's a sponsored film, and I was reminded of it. I was watching the films on Energy last night. This is a film about the wonder of the railway. It's an advert for the railway, but it's unlike any other advert I know. No, I have no notes. They're here on the back of my reserved sign. Okay, so Snow. A film that I said I was reminded of last night, and I think, again, it's a kind of an easy way of trying to understand what the BFI, the British Film Institute's collection, is really about. That's a film, again, made to promote the railways, but it's also by what we would consider an experimental filmmaker, Geoffrey Jones, in collaboration with the BBC Radiophonic unit, so using extraordinary cutting-edge sound design, influenced by American jazz, so that was a re-recorded track by Johnny Dankworth. And in terms of editing and ambition, the film is, I think, actually one of my favourites in the collection. So I've got a nice, dry presentation here for you. My actual full title is Archive Online Distribution Manager, which contains many inherent contradictions, but we will discuss those as we go along. So the Bfi National Archive, it's big, it's got a lot of film and TV in it, and it's about preserving that film and TV. It's about interpreting it, but we have other collections as well. There's a press book for Carry On Nurse down there. We have a huge special collections, in fact, stills, production stills, posters, etc. We're also about knowledge and education. We're about the intellectual capital around those films that we collect, and the interpretation, and of course education. We're about exhibition and distribution as well, not just in our venue at the South Bank, because we're not just about our collection, we're about film culture in general. And we exhibit films around the country in collaboration with regional partners, and that's world cinema as well as our collection. I've written here online innovation. It should probably say digital innovation. And it's funny, I work for the BFI, and I struggle with the word sometimes, innovation online. And the reason I think I do that is because we started quite a while ago. This is a bit of a dry slide, but I think it's important, and I haven't really understood how to custom animation PowerPoint yet, so it's a bit slow. But what I wanted to show here was that the BFI started thinking about how to get its collection online back in 1997. And that has real implications for what we're doing now, because actually, in terms of what we built, the infrastructures, the standards to which we digitized, all of those things, they have massive implications. It's made us a little bit of a Cinderella sometimes with our online projects, because as everyone working in online archives will tell you, you have to assume this sort of 3 to 5 year, you're going to have to do it all again anyway, in terms of providing video material. So we started off in the late 1990s with the Bfi Online Pilots. We launched the first iteration of Bfi in 1999. And in 2003, we launched Screen Online, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more in detail. And as I said, I'm really here just to tell you what we have done and what we are doing, and hopefully that will kind of lead to some more complex questions as we go through. In 2006, we launched a filmographic database. That's exactly what it says on the tin. 2006, also a download shop. And in 2007, the Mediatex. Now, Mediatex aren't online projects. They're digital projects. They are site-specific points at which we hope that you can come in, drop in, and start exploring our collection, largely British film from the 1890s onwards. We have one in BFI South Bank. We have one who's just opened in Wrexham. We have one in Cambridge. There's one opening in Newcastle. And I'm forgetting another one, but there is another one. You can find out more on the website. And in 2009, so last year, we launched In View, again, a project I'll talk about in a little bit more detail in a second. Oh, okay. Yeah, there's some pictures. I'm going to go through them. Sorry. Diamonds. That's what I chose in custom animation. Oh, next one. There we go. Okay, so Screen Online. I'm going to go to it, actually. This is an encyclopedia of British film and television history. So in terms of its editorial agenda, it's got a very clear one. It's telling a story. And it's 3,500 plus titles. We add to it on a monthly basis. Around 700 hours as we speak of moving image material. And that's contextualized and categorized for, I guess we say an education audience. What that means is open to interpretation. Access, I'm going to show it to you in a minute. This site is publicly available on the web anywhere you are in the world. There's no password protection. But what you can access, and maybe I'll just go to the site to show you. What you can access is, What you can access is the information and the context around the films. What you can't access unless you are physically sitting in a school, a library, a museum, an HE or FE institution, you cannot access the moving image material. So this month we have a focus on social experiment TV. We're also showcasing Alice in Wonderland, which we recently restored with a new soundtrack by Neil Brand. And again, this is really an encyclopedia of British film and TV history. So, for example, if 20s and 30s avant-garde is your thing, you're going to be able to access the kind of analysis of a movement, short albeit, as well as entries on each individual film. This site is not just the BFI's collection. In order to tell a rich story about British film and TV history, it cannot just be our collection. We relied on our regional film archives all around the country, including in Scottish Screen, and Northern Ireland doesn't have a film archive as such, as well as the BBC, as well as Channel 4, and as well as some of the studio partners in the US. So this is not a site that is just about our collection. It's a site that is about our collection and lots of other collections, and trying to tell the story of the development of film and TV from the 1890s. You can search it in lots of different ways, and you're going to find, I just showed you 1930s avant-garde, but for example, if you searched under Anglo-Chinese, I think it's called, British Chinese cinema, this is the only actually kind of collection in terms of intellectual capital that I know of online, looking specifically at this area. So this site is very deep. It's got a lot of information, and its architecture is important to us. The way that we've been able to make links between different titles, the way we've been able to talk about, make links between people involved in making these films, movements, as well as more general stories. And it's also for TV as well. We often talk about film archives, but we are very committed as well to telling the story of TV. Sitcom, for example. Again, a little tour through the history of sitcom, but there's also going to be more unexpected stories that you'll be able to access as you go through the site. As Mike said earlier, this was before my time, but we were involved with Lux as well, so we've got artists, film and video. We also have the kind of early BFI, when we were still commissioning works, the BFI production board. Now, how do I get back to this? It's this, okay. So as I said, what you've just seen, that site is available to everyone. The moving image, however, is rights issues limited to educational users. And the way that we can do that at the moment, given the government's kind of digital infrastructure, is that we can actually physically identify the computer that you are trying to access the material from. It's streamed, and it all needs to be redigitized because it was done in around 2000. I've got to hurry up. Okay, InView. This is kind of Screen Online Mark II, but it's a different editorial focus. So this is not the story of film and TV. This is the story of the 20th century using film. So this is film as record. And again, this is a partner. God, that sounds like a gong. Have I got like 1 minute? This is a partner project. So it is non-fiction material. And really importantly here, actually, it's a lot of collections that have never been seen before. So, for example, something like the Bernard Braden interviews that were done in the 70s, never made it onto TV, where he interviewed a range of celebrities, thinkers, and members of the public and asked them similar questions, from Enoch Powell to ladies on the street, about where they thought Britain would be in 20 years, what they understood as the definition of culture, all these sorts of things, never seen before. It's got the first time, it's got the parliamentary debates, Hansard, from the time that they started live recording them on there. It also has around 1,000 hours of 2,000 associated documents. So we're talking about scripts, we're talking about storyboards, we're talking about government COI kind of criteria commissioning sheets. And that's available in much better quality to the HE community, downloadable. again, for them to use as they will. And I think this is one of the problems that we have at the moment with providing access to our material online. We're actually very, very willing to do it. We want to do it. What we haven't worked out how to do yet, and I think we're working on it, is how to make that into more of a conversation. I want to know, as an ex-history teacher, I want to know what people are doing with this material in HE institutions. I want to know how it's making them think about their particular discipline or their topic in different and new ways. And I want to be able to, in some way, not capture all of that information, but I want to be able to be aware of it, so that can inform the way in which these kinds of platforms develop. That's something, I guess, that we can discuss a bit later. How do we do that? Do we want to do that, and why is it important? I know that when InView was being promoted around the country to academics, there was a huge amount of surprise about collections that we assumed perhaps they knew about, that they didn't, as well as titles, for example, the partisan IRA film, Ireland Behind the Lines, that people have been trying to get hold of for 30 years, but had been unable to. And I think there's some very interesting stories about history. Rick spoke about strategic forgetting on the part of archives. In fact, I think that's true, but I think it's not just archives. In fact, the way that we approach our history means that we often strategically forget things, and if archives can find a way to help redress that balance, so much the better. Mediatheks, I'm not going to really have time to talk about them, sorry. Go and explore the archive in site-specific places all across the UK. And issues and challenges, I'm going to go... I don't need to go through this. They have these. Do you like my image for rights? I was quite proud of that. I think the last thing that I'll say is about expectation. This is something that's really interesting to me about when we're thinking about how we present our archive online. There are such diverse expectations of what we should be providing, why we should be providing it, when and how. And being able to manage those is very difficult. And if someone's got the kind of algorithm written down and could pass it to me later, that would be fantastic. I'll stop there because I have to. And I'm sorry I've moved around a lot, but I hope that gives you a flavour of the BFI as it is at the moment.